Welcome to Myths and Sagas, where the world's oldest stories breathe again. Here the gods still walk among us, heroes rise and fall, and the echoes of ancient voices still shape the way we see our own lives. Today we step into one of the most enduring myths of all, the tale of Persephone. A goddess who moves between two worlds, she is the heartbeat of the seasons, the bridge between life and death, and proof that even in darkness, growth is possible. Before we walk into the meadow where her story begins, let's meet Persephone as the Greeks knew her. She is the daughter of Zeus, king of the gods, and Demeter, goddess of the harvest. In her earliest years, she was Kor, the maiden, a figure of innocence, beauty, and the promise of new life. But her destiny would make her more than that. Persephone holds one of the most unusual roles in the Greek pantheon. She is both the goddess of spring's renewal and the queen of the underworld. Half of the year, she is the bringer of blossoms, the one whose return awakens the fields, orchards, and gardens. The other half, she rules beside Hades, presiding over the realm of the dead with a calm, unshakable authority. Her powers are tied to the rhythms of life itself. She is growth and decay, beginnings and endings woven into one being. In her hands the seasons turn. In her gaze, the living and the dead find their place in the grand balance. Persephone's story is not just about a goddess taken into darkness. It's about a woman who learned to stand between two worlds, to carry both light and shadow, and to hold her own in the company of kings. Persephone was the very picture of springtime innocence. They called her Kor, the maiden, and the name fit her like sunlight on a clear morning. Daughter of mighty Zeus and the earth goddess Demeter, she spent her days in sunlit fields, blissfully untouched by sorrow. You can see her, can't you? Running her fingertips over the tops of wildflowers, laughing as butterflies dance around her. A world in full bloom, and Persephone, dark-eyed, free-spirited, its living heartbeat. In those early days, Persephone knew only joy. Under her mother's fierce, watchful gaze, she grew up amid fertile valleys and abundant gardens. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, guarded her as the earth guards a seed. The bond between them was unshakable. Mother and daughter, earth and blossom, an unbroken circle of love. As Demeter taught mortals to sow and reap, Persephone often walked beside her, scattering laughter like petals in the wind. She was spring's first bloom, cherished by all who beheld her. But even in paradise, shadows can stir. Deep beneath the meadow's roots, in the sunless kingdom of the dead, Hades had taken notice. Each rare visit he made to the surface, his eyes would find her, the girl whose light pierced the gloom of his heart, a king long accustomed to silence, suddenly restless. And so a plan began to take shape, quietly, fatefully. Zeus, Persephone's own father, had promised Hades one of his daughters as a bride, and when Hades named Persephone, Zeus did not refuse. He knew Demeter's answer would be an unshakable no. She would never allow her only child to vanish into a world without sunlight. So the brothers forged a secret pact. It was decided. Persephone would be taken to Hades' realm, with or without her consent. Persephone wandered the meadow, unaware of the storm gathering beyond her sight. Overhead, the sky's edge darkened, a shadow passing briefly across the sun. The stillness of the meadow broke with a sound like the earth itself was crying out. A deep, shuddering rumble rose beneath her feet, the ground split open, tearing the world she knew in two. From that gaping wound surged a black chariot, pulled by 4 stallions the colour of midnight, their eyes blazing with fire. And on the chariot stood Hades, lord of the dead, his gaze fixed on her with the force of inevitability. Persephone froze, caught between disbelief and terror. Then instinct took over and she turned to flee, but it was already too late. Hades reached out, his grip unyielding, and swept her into the chariot. The air filled with the sound of the horse's hooves pounding against stone, and her voice, sharp, pleading, rang out across the meadow. The stallions plunged back into the chasm, the earth closing over them as if nothing had ever happened. In an instant, the sunlit world was whole again, except for the empty space where she had stood. Her basket lay overturned, its flowers scattered and wilting in the grass. Far away, her companions called her name, voices shaking with confusion and fear. Some say the nymph Cyane tried to stop the abduction, only to dissolve into a river of her own grief. Others say the land itself mourned as its child was stolen away. High above, the sun saw everything, and deep below, the underworld claimed its reluctant queen. When Demeter returned to the meadow and found it empty, a mother's instinct told her the truth before any words could. Her daughter was gone. The nymphs wept and stammered, but their stories only painted fragments, a sudden noise, a flash of shadow, Persephone's cry, and then nothing. Panic hardened into resolve. Demeter began her search, carrying twin torches that burned day and night. She wandered the earth for 9 days without rest, without food, without the nectar of the gods. She scoured every valley, climbed every hill, questioned every river spirit. Her call for Persephone echoed through forests and across empty fields, but no answer came. On the 10th day, she met Hecate, goddess of night roads and restless spirits. Hecate had heard Persephone scream but had not seen the abductor. Together they went to Helios, the all-seeing sun who had witnessed the crime. Helios told her everything, that Hades had taken Persephone and that Zeus himself had given silent consent. The truth struck like a blade. Betrayed by her own brother, Demeter's grief turned into a force that could starve the world. She abandoned her place among the gods, retreating to live among mortals in the guise of an old woman. The warmth she once poured into the earth she now withheld. Crops failed, trees dropped their fruit, the fields turned to dust. Famine spread across the land. People raised their hands to the sky, praying for mercy, but Demeter's heart was closed to all but her missing child. And still she searched, her torches lighting the long, cold nights. Far beneath the living world, Persephone sat in the shadowed halls of the underworld. At first the darkness pressed in on her, heavy and unyielding. She thought only of escape, of sunlight, of her mother's arms, of the meadow she had lost. Days felt like seasons, and the silence was filled with the soft murmurs of the dead. But the longer she remained, the more her fear began to shift. Hades, though he had stolen her from the earth, treated her not with cruelty, but with a strange, quiet care. He gave her a throne beside his own. He showed her gardens that glowed faintly in the dim light, filled with pale flowers that bloomed without the sun. He spoke to her not as a captive, but as someone he hoped might one day stay by choice. And in the stillness, Persephone began to see what this realm truly was. It was not only a place of endings, but also of memory. Souls passed before her, and she listened to their stories. She offered them kindness, a gentle word, a steady gaze. Slowly, the shadows seemed less like walls and more like a veil she could move within. In time, her posture straightened, her voice gained weight, and her presence filled the hall. She was no longer simply Demeter's daughter. She was Persephone, queen of the underworld. And when Hermes finally arrived with news from Olympus, he did not find a frightened girl, but a woman who had learned to stand in 2 worlds at once. Hermes came with a message from Zeus. Persephone was to return to her mother. At the sound of it, her heart lifted. She pictured sunlight breaking over the horizon, the warmth of Demeter's embrace, the smell of fresh earth in spring. But when she looked at Hades, she saw something unexpected, a shadow of loss in his eyes. Before she could leave, Hades offered her a parting gift, a pomegranate, split open to reveal its jeweled seeds. He urged her to take nourishment for the journey, his voice low and careful. Persephone, weary and hungry, lifted the fruit to her lips. The taste was sweet, rich, and unlike anything she had known. She ate a few seeds, not knowing, or perhaps not letting herself remember, that to eat the food of the underworld was to bind herself to it forever. When she emerged into the light, Demeter ran to meet her. Their reunion was fierce and wordless. Demeter's joy spilled into the land itself. Grass sprang green beneath their feet, flowers opened, and the air filled with the scent of new life. For a moment, the world was whole again. But when Demeter asked if she had eaten anything in the underworld, Persephone told her the truth. The joy in her mother's eyes faltered. They both knew the old law could not be broken. Persephone could not remain in the living world forever. A bargain was struck. For part of the year, she would live with Demeter under the sun. For the rest, she would return to Hades and her dark throne. And so the cycle began. Light and dark, spring and winter, the turning of the year bound to the steps of one queen who belonged to both worlds. When the time came for Persephone to descend again, she no longer entered the underworld as a captive. She walked its shadowed paths with purpose, the soft glow of the asphodel gardens lighting her way. The shades of the dead bowed as she passed, for they knew her as their queen. In the great hall beside Hades, she ruled with a calm authority that no one could mistake for fear. Her voice carried through the vast chamber like a steady flame. She listened to disputes among the spirits, guided the lost, and eased the restless. Even the darkest corners of that realm seemed different under her gaze, less cold, more certain. The underworld had changed her, but she had changed it too. She had brought a measure of life to the land of the dead, not in the way of blossoms or harvests, but in the way of memory and mercy. She became the bridge between the living and the departed, carrying both grief and hope in equal measure. Above, the world felt her absence. Demeter mourned, and winter settled over the land. But below, Persephone's presence was steady, her crown resting lightly on her brow. She was no longer just the maiden core. She was the queen of the underworld, and she held her throne with grace. The seasons turned, and once more the time came for Persephone to rise from the underworld. When she stepped into the light, Demeter was there waiting, her joy spilling over into the earth. Winter loosened its grip, ice melted, and the first flowers of spring unfurled at their feet. But beneath the celebration was the weight of the bargain. Demeter knew she would lose her daughter again when the agreed months had passed. Persephone knew it too. They clung to each other in those days, walking the fields together, sharing the warmth of the sun, knowing it could not last forever. This cycle became the rhythm of the world. When Persephone returned to her mother, the land flourished. Crops grew tall, orchards bent with fruit, rivers ran full and sweet. When she descended back to Hades, the earth withdrew into itself. Leaves fell, fields lay barren, and the cold crept in. The people saw this pattern and understood it. Persephone's time above meant life, her time below meant rest and stillness. And though the parting was always bittersweet, both mother and daughter knew they were bound to this balance, a balance that touched every living thing. Each year when the time came for her return, Persephone rose from the depths of the underworld and stepped back into the light. The world seemed to hold its breath in those moments. Snow softened, buds swelled on the trees, and the air shifted with the scent of green things ready to grow. Her first steps onto the earth brought an almost electric change. Grass pushed through thawing soil, flowers opened in a rush of colour, and rivers sang louder with the melting of ice. Everywhere she walked, the land followed her lead, waking from its long sleep. For Demeter, those days were a kind of healing. She and Persephone would walk side by side, speaking softly, laughing, touching the crops as they grew taller each week. They knew the wheel would turn again, that the months would pass and the farewell would come. But for now they lived in the fullness of spring, and the earth mirrored their joy. To the people, her return was a promise kept, proof that light would always come back after darkness, that life would always rise again after loss. The years moved in a rhythm set by Persephone's steps. Half the year the world flourished under her and Demeter's care. Fields turned gold with grain, trees bent with the weight of their fruit, and the air was alive with the hum of bees. The other half, the earth withdrew. Leaves fell, the ground hardened, and silence settled over the land. People learned to live within this pattern. They celebrated her return with planting and feasting, and they endured her absence with patience, knowing spring would come again. Every change in the seasons carried her name. Persephone herself became a woman of two realms. In the underworld, she ruled with dignity and command. In the world above, she walked as a daughter, a friend, and the living spirit of growth. She belonged to both places fully. Her heart stretched between sunlight and shadow, life and death, warmth and cold. And so the cycle continued, not as a tragedy but as a balance. Her story became the Earth's own story, the eternal turning between loss and return. Persephone's journey was more than a tale to explain the seasons. It was the story of transformation. She began as Kor, the sheltered maiden of spring, and became a queen who could stand in the darkness without fear. She learned that power does not always come from where you expect it, and that even in loss, there can be strength. Her life was a bridge between worlds. In the light, she brought renewal and abundance. In the dark, she brought mercy and memory. She knew that both realms needed her, and she accepted the weight of that truth. Each year, her ascent reminded the living that winter would not last forever. Each descent taught them that rest and stillness were part of life's design. She was not just a symbol of beauty or rebirth. She was balance itself. And so, when you see the first flowers break through the snow, you might think of Persephone returning to the light. And when autumn's chill comes, you might picture her walking back into the shadows, crown steady, eyes forward, carrying both life and death within her. Her story lives in every seed that falls, every blossom that rises, and every heart that learns to carry both sorrow and joy in the same breath. Thank you for walking this path with me through Persephone's story, from sunlight to shadow, from maiden to queen. Her myth is a reminder that change is not the end, and that even the darkest seasons are only part of a greater cycle. If this journey spoke to you, join me again here on Myths and Sagas for more stories like this. Ancient tales told as they were meant to be heard, full of life, depth, and wonder. If you enjoyed this, let me know by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It helps this community grow and keeps these myths alive. And if you think someone you know needs to hear Persephone's story, share it with them. You never know who might find a little light in it. Until next time, may you carry a little of Persephone's strength with you, and may you always find your way back to the light.